Psychological factors are part of the basic package that every athlete needs to be successful. I mean, we could look at the technical factors, the biomechanical factors, we could look at the physical factors, and then that third major area is having a look at the big computer that sits between the athlete's ears and making sure that that's focused right and prepared right and trained right.
If you have an athlete or a player who is very well trained in the mental skills, they can certainly add to their performance and allow them to perform at their best. If they're not, if they don't have these skills, then it can be a big disadvantage to their performance.
The things that go on in an athlete's mind can greatly affect their performance. Psychological factors can be just as important as physical factors in determining an athlete's success. Motivation is a state of mind that makes us want to achieve something.
There are different kinds of motivation that are involved in the development of elite athletes' performances and career paths. The most important one is what we call intrinsic motivation or internal motivation. And that's an inbuilt desire on the part of the individual to do something special, to achieve a certain goal, to conduct themselves in certain ways. And of course, it operates at a very high level for successful elite athletes. We find athletes with high intrinsic levels of motivation seem to be doing things for the right reasons, because they actually enjoy doing it.
When an athlete enjoys what they are doing, they're less likely to give up out of boredom or frustration. Conversely, if athletes perform to get external rewards, they are considered to be extrinsically motivated.
This is the motivation that, in a sense, is imposed on athletes. And that's the motivation to do things for another reason, not just because I like doing it, but because I owe this to somebody, or I have to prove myself to somebody, or there is a financial or some other reward that's available at the end of it, or I simply want to avoid failure. Extrinsic motivation in sport, of course, is right.
And the winner is Melissa Ashton.
Because we offer medals, we offer grand final cups, we offer money, we offer sponsorships, exposure, status and recognition, places on teams.
New Australian long course triathlon champion from last week in Port Macquarie. Let's hear it up for New South Wales, Melissa Ashton.
Although it's effective, extrinsic motivation is generally not as good as internal motivation for maintaining an athlete's interest in their sport. Positive motivation aims to strengthen desired behaviours by the use of encouragement and incentive. Negative motivation, on the other hand, occurs when athletes are inspired to do well out of fear of failure. To help motivate athletes, coaches use a technique called reinforcement.
I want us to step up a little closer outside the three-point line and put a little more pressure on the ball. More pressure on the ball, fellas.
Three, Manly, 1, 2, 3.
Positive reinforcement uses rewards to encourage desired behaviours. When an athlete is rewarded for a good performance, they want to recreate that good feeling by repeating the performance.
When somebody behaves in a particular way, if it's immediately followed with some form of positive reinforcement, it encourages the person to want to do that again and want to take it to another level and another level and another level. So parents, teachers, coaches tend to use a lot of positive reinforcement.
Negative reinforcement uses punishment to try to get rid of unwanted behaviours. This can be effective in the short term, but over time it can reduce an athlete's self-confidence and end up lowering performance. So, positive motivation, backed by positive reinforcement, is the better approach for long-term success. Reinforcement comes in different forms. Social reinforcement is where the coach or teammates use verbal and non-verbal praise and cues to positively reinforce the athlete.
Patience offensively, fellas. It's a good job.
Verbally through just communicating with them, giving them
Foul
feedback.
blocking out, guys, okay?
Non-verbally just through their body language. So often athletes or players know what their coach may be thinking just through their body language. And I guess coaches can also see that through their athletes.
Quite often, reinforcement from peers is most likely to bring further success. Material reinforcement is the use of such rewards as medals and trophies. This can be especially important in the early stages of learning a sport. Internal reinforcement is the feeling of pride an athlete gets when they can see that they have done something well. This encourages them to feel that way again by performing the skill the same way in the future. This is the most effective form of reinforcement because it gives the athlete a sense of satisfaction and promotes enjoyment of the game. Individual athletes respond differently to these different types of reinforcement, so coaches have to think about how to use them to get the best results.
5, 4 and a half, 5, 4, 5. James.
Anxiety is a feeling or emotion that is connected to a situation that we perceive as threatening.
Anxiety is a state of mind that afflicts all of us at some stage. There is always going to be some anxiety about the performance.
There are two types of anxiety, trait and state. Athletes who tend to perceive situations as stressful or threatening are considered to have a high level of trait anxiety. State anxiety, on the other hand, is how an athlete feels under a particular set of circumstances, such as preparing for a difficult dive. The level of anxiety experienced by an athlete results from the interaction between these two types. Experiencing anxiety is actually good for athletes up to a certain point. It's when anxiety becomes excessive that it has a detrimental effect on performance. This is because anxiety is linked to arousal. While anxiety is a feeling or a psychological process, arousal is a physiological process. Arousal is basically brain activity. The more active the brain, the more aroused you are. Our level of arousal affects our ability to perform physical skills. Too much arousal can have negative effects, such as tensing up of the muscles. This is where the link between anxiety and arousal comes in. The greater the anxiety, the greater the level of arousal, and the greater the impact of anxiety on the athlete's physical skills and performance. Sports psychologists talk about this phenomenon as the inverted U hypothesis.
It's been around for a little while, the inverted U hypothesis. It's basically a graph that plots a relationship between an athlete or a player's performance and their anxiety or arousal level.
What is most interesting with the curve is that as arousal levels increase, performance also increases up to a certain point. Beyond that point, performance begins to drop. So the inverted U shows us that there is an optimum level of arousal for optimum performance. Different people will have different optimum arousal points. Extroverts thrive on arousal, while introverts often perform better using a quieter approach. The nature of the skill can also influence the optimum arousal level. Gross motor activity can have a higher level of arousal, but finer motor skills require less arousal. That is to say, the optimal level of arousal for a rugby player will be much higher than for a darts player. Frequently, optimal arousal doesn't occur at just a single point on the inverted U. This is why some sports psychologists talk about another theory called the zone.
We also know that many athletes perform great feats on the sporting field without absolutely hitting it spot on every time. In other words, there's a little bit of variation in there, which is what we call the zone.
Essentially, the zone is when people are mentally and physically focused, when they're balanced, when their mind and body is one. That's when people perform well. It's almost been programmed for their mind and body to work as one. It's just when everything clicks, and that's when you get your personal best or a great performance.
Our next competitor on ring is representing Australia.
How athletes deal with anxiety is more important than how much anxiety they experience. The idea is to manage anxiety so as to get you to your optimum level of arousal.
No athlete wants to look as though they're unskilled, incompetent, unable to cope. Going into any performance, there is always going to be an element of anxiety. The question is, of course, is that manageable? And does it dominate? Or does the focus on and the desire to perform well and do things positively and correctly, is that the dominant thing, which of course is what we're looking for?
You do need a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of adrenaline and arousal levels to perform at your best, but it all needs to be controlled. So anxiety can be helpful, but it can also hinder your performance. It's about controlling it.
There are several techniques that can be used to control anxiety. These include concentration skills, mental rehearsal, visualization, relaxation, and goal setting.
There are many types of concentration skills. I guess you can have skills that increase your focus to internal factors. You can have skills that increase your awareness to external factors. But generally speaking, concentration is probably better described as focusing on the right thing at the right time.
Every sport has critical keys or cues which athletes can focus on. A sprinter might focus on the arm movements that help to drive them forward.
Fast arms, head down, fast arms.
By focusing